What exactly is the wonderful institution we call entrepreneurship? Where do we start when we seek to understand it and explain it? Eamonn Butler has written a primer for us.
This is the Economics for Business podcast. We're here to help all businesses become champions for customers and value, improving lives with preferred and innovative products and services. We offer you the knowledge and tools to make your entrepreneurial journey a successful one. Now, here's your host, Hunter Hastings.
Hi, Hunter Hastings here. Entrepreneurship is the greatest force for good that has ever emerged from the checkered history of society and civilization. It's an unmitigated positive. It delivers the betterment that everyone seeks. It does the exploration and the experimentation and takes the risks that are necessary for the realization of improvement. It creates a contest to establish how products and services can get better, as judged by everyday people, consumers, us. It puts markets, i.e. people, in charge rather than the politicians and the powerful and the elites. It grants our wishes and it meets our needs, and it does so every day. It features mutuality. If one of us succeeds as an entrepreneur, it's because another of us has succeeded in fulfilling our wants. It can't operate any other way. So let's call it an institution, a set of practices that has emerged over time to guide our daily lives and our mutual interactions. How can we describe this institution? How can we explain it? Where do we start? Our guest today, Eamonn Butler, has invented a new literary form for that very task. It's the Economics Primer, or let's call it a primer, as we're more likely to say in the US. The economics in Economics Primer means that he makes simple and easy to consume some potentially challenging subjects in economics that could be hard going in the hands of a writer who is less empathic towards his readers. Subjects like the life and works of F.A. Hayek and of Ludwig von Mises and of all the classical liberals and the entire Austrian school of economics. And the word primer means that these slim books are the right place to start for someone who is seeking an entry point for a complex subject. Not to make it simple, but to make it accessible, inviting further exploration. Eamonn Butler is an economist with degrees from St. Andrews and Heriot-Watt universities. He's the co-founder and director of the wonderful free market think tank, the Adam Smith Institute, based in London, England. He's been on the board of directors of the Mont Pelerin Society, and he's the author of more than 25 books. He's here today to help us define entrepreneurship. Eamonn, welcome to the Economics for Business podcast.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Well, it's a great honor for us. You're the director of the Adam Smith Institute, a very prestigious institution. It's dedicated, I think, to the advancing of free market thinking through policy design and policy advice and influence. We're going to focus on another one of your activities today, though, Eamonn, which is as an author. And you've authored many books, and several of them you've given the title primer, or is it primer in English? I can never get that right.
We say both, actually, but I say primer.
Okay.
Let's call the whole thing off.
Right. I particularly love Austrian Economics, a primer. That's been a great book in my library and for a lot of Austrians. Classical Liberalism, a primer. And then you varied your title slightly. There's one called Capitalism, an Introduction, and Ayn Rand, an Introduction. And today we're talking about another one, Entrepreneurship, a primer. So just tell us about your thinking about the format here, Eamonn. Short books, is that because people can't read long books or they're overwhelmed by textbooks or it's an alternative to TikTok? How do you see the primer as a literary form?
It actually goes back to 1978, believe it or not, when my friend John Blundell, who went on to run the Institute of Economic Affairs in London and with the Koch Institute in America, and then with Atlas Foundation. And he was in London, and he ran a little conference which was called the Carl Menger Society. And the theme for this conference in London was Hayek. and a libertarian bookshop, the Alternative Bookshop, had come and had a desk full of books about Hayek and by Hayek and so on. And I saw a number of people. There were a lot of people like business people, not academic people at all, and young people. And they were looking at these books by Hayek and, picking up the Constitution of Liberty and putting it down again and thinking, you could see them thinking, where do I start? And I thought, yes, people need to know where you start with all these subjects. And so I did a little book on Hayek, just trying to explain Hayek in very simple words. And my colleague Manson Piri said you mustn't use any words longer than an inch. So I tried to do that, and I think it's an extremely good discipline. And then I did one on Hayek and on Friedman. I did another one on Mises, and then John Blundell asked me to do one on Adam Smith, and it's really gone from there. So my target really is young people who perhaps don't understand these things and want to know where to start, and indeed older people, people in business or any other walks of life. Who are interested in these ideas but are just overwhelmed by the academic side of things.
Good. And are you able to track their activity thereafter? Do they come back and buy the source books, or do they go on to study?
That I don't really know, but I certainly have had huge numbers of people coming to me, when I travel the world and so on, saying, "Oh, I'd read your book back in the 1980s, and it was really helped me to understand Hayek or Friedman or Mises or whatever it was." So I think people probably do go on to get more interested in these ideas, and that's really a very large part of my thinking here. I want them to understand the ideas, and then they might get enthusiastic about those ideas and then start talking to other people about them. And that's what I want to do.
Good. Well, thank you for what you do. So let's talk about entrepreneurship, a primer. You start off by asking, why do we care about entrepreneurship? And you answer very clearly, it's innovation. The raising of productivity and the raising of living standards thereby. So, is that the whole point of entrepreneurship, Eamonn? Is innovation?
Well, I think actually invention, innovation, and entrepreneurship are really rather different things. We need new things. We need people to invent things that haven't been thought of before. And we need innovation, which is basically to improve those things and make an existing product better, or find a new purpose for it, or a new way of producing it, or whatever. And then you need entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is the process by which the resources are marshaled in order to produce those things that are better and quicker and faster. So yes, its innovation is what fuels progress and human development, but it's really the entrepreneur that brings together all of the resources that are needed to make that improvement happen, and then to make more happen, and to continue to make it happen. So the entrepreneur, I think, has a very important but almost unique role in terms of getting those resources together, land, labor, capital, all the other things, and actually creating something which the thinkers, have just invented in their heads.
And then you start to break that down. I'm going to list some headings that you provide in the book, and we can dig into them a little bit. So, number one in innovation is better products and what you call cascading development. What's that term telling us?
Well, one invention or one development, one innovation leads to another. For example, some bright spark found ways of taking sand, which is a perfectly useless commodity, and making microchips out of it. And then from those microchips, you can make computers, and you can make mobile phones, and you can make all sorts of other electronic equipment. So what happens is that one invention then leads to another. The fact that you have this technology available means that other innovators, other entrepreneurs can think up, dream up all sorts of new applications for that technology. and create new technologies. And then similarly, other people further down the road can take those technologies, like take the mobile phone and say, well, I could actually, put a compass in there so you'd never get lost, or I can put an app in there that will wake you up when your train reaches your home station and things like that. So one invention leads to another, and nothing is obvious. I mean, people say, why did it take so long to invent the bicycle? Because the Chinese had all the technology, but it's because it wasn't obvious, and you had to do one thing at a time. And basically, somebody developed a frame with two wheels that you pushed along with your feet, and then other people looked at that and said, well, hang on, we could power that. If you put some pedals on the wheel, it'd be very much easier, and so on and so on. And then other people think, well, if you put gears on, it's even easier going uphill. So one innovation leads to another, to another, to another, to another. And that's why human progress is just so dynamic and open-ended.
Yeah, there's a interesting book by Brian Arthur, who's an economist, about technology, and he said that's the nature of technology. It always builds on something that came before it, and you can trace it back to the wheel and the rock, and it's Darwinian evolution of a kind. It selects for
Absolutely, and of course, yes. And what you've got to remember, of course, that these products that we're talking about, I mean, even simple things like the bicycle, these things transform people's lives the world over. I mean, cars transform people's lives, computers transform people's lives, phones transform the lives of some of the poorest people on the planet. There's however many billion mobile phones out there, and it means that somebody in rural India can check grain prices, for example, and know whether it's worth planting wheat this year or rice. And these they really do change people's lives.
So that points to another heading in your book, which is looking at entrepreneurship through the information theory lens. Entrepreneurship is better information, and people can share that information, as you said. So we spread better ways of doing things and improve that way. That's entrepreneurship as a knowledge process. Is that how you think of it?
Yes, well, this is my Hayek fixation coming through, of course. But yes, entrepreneurs are always, seeking out niches for new products. So that they're always thinking, there's an unsatisfied want here that a new product or a new process could actually fill. And that's a knowledge issue. It's what is it that works best, works quickest, works cheapest, and what is the best and quickest and cheapest way to produce it. So again, that isn't obvious. It's something that you have to try, and you experiment, and you see what works, and you drop the things that don't work, and you concentrate on the ones that do. And by doing that, you build up knowledge. You build up knowledge in particular about what doesn't work. That's very important in entrepreneurship, because most entrepreneurs have had lots of failures along the way. Um, and and you build up knowledge about what does work, and you build up knowledge about what people want and what changes their lives and what improves their lives. So yes, it is very much of a knowledge problem. It's finding out the best arrangement of resources that will give us the greatest human value at the lowest human cost.
And then that points to another aspect. You call it long-term improvement, and Austrian economists are very interested in the role of time for the entrepreneur. And we have this rather abstruse term about low time preference. I'm willing to sacrifice today to learn, to assemble resources in order to get my profit tomorrow. You say long-term separates economics and entrepreneurship from politics, which we like a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, people often accuse business of being short-termist, and they say, "Oh, you're only looking at the quarter's figures, and everything is done in order to convince the analysts and so on that the firm's really, really great." But what you've got to remember is that politicians are even are very much more short-termist than business. For politicians, it's the electoral cycle. it's every 2 years or 4 years or 6 years or whatever it is. In this country, it's 5 years. So they're always looking to that, and they can't really do anything beyond that. You can't plan beyond that because you might not be in office anymore. So you've got to do something that's quick and easy and dirty, and it gets you some headlines, but it doesn't necessarily solve humanity's great problem. Entrepreneurs, on the other hand, if you have a business, yeah, you want it to be profitable. You want to do good stuff, and you want to produce stuff that people actually value and will come back for more. But you want to maximize the value of your business. You want to maximize what economists call the net present value. That's very long term because it means the whole value for the duration of the company has to be taken into consideration, and you look at interest rates and so on, and then you say, yeah, this is what the company is worth because it's going to produce a stream of benefits ad infinitum. So entrepreneurs actually have a very long term focus. They're focused on the whole life of their product or their company. And as I say, more than that, of course, they do want to provide a good service to customers. They don't just want to do something and make some money, and then everybody says, oh, I bought that product and it's hopeless and it doesn't work and I'm never going back there again. You don't make money doing that. You make money producing a product that people say, this is absolutely fantastic. And they tell their friends, this has really changed the way I live. And you really ought to go and buy one of these. And it's in that kind of spreading the word and repeat custom. That's how you make money. There's no such thing as a quick buck. You can make one quick buck, but you'll never make two. So you've got to keep your customers happy, and that's it's a long-term enterprise. It's not like politics where you want to keep them happy for 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever it happens to be, and then move on. No, not at all. You want to keep them happy for the long term because that's what benefits you. So it's a bit like Adam Smith's invisible hand. The self-interest of an entrepreneur is to help others, because if you help others and produce good products, then they'll come back and buy more. But that's a very long-term viewpoint.
Yeah, but Henry Hazlitt said that long-termism is the basis for morality, doing the right thing over the long term, and we find what we like to call an ethic of entrepreneurship there, that, as you said, it's to serve people and continually serve them and keep them coming back. So do you find that same idea of an ethic?
Yes, well, I certainly buy that. I think I always think that business is actually far more ethical than people give it credit for. Most people that I know that are in business want to produce something which will delight their customers, not just please them, but delight them. And that's why they're in it. And they want to produce the best and the quickest and the cheapest and the most value for money. That's what they want to do. And I know so many people in business who they've got plenty of money. They don't need any more money, but they're just driven to do this. They keep on doing it. Serial entrepreneurs carry on doing it because it's just what they want to do. And it's and they do it obviously for their own reasons, because they get pleasure from it. But at the same time, it benefits everybody else. Now, if that's not moral, I don't know what is.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned in your book internationalism with a Smithian kind of a viewpoint, increasing the extent of the market into international scope. And even the smallest entrepreneurs can do that today. So that's another innovation.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I mean, even a small entrepreneurial firm can trade on a global stage. Obviously, countries are different, and there are barriers and all the rest of it. But if you've got a good product and you can fill a particular niche, then the world's your oyster. Particularly today with international communications, and you've got internet and Zoom and all sorts of things. You can trade much more easily internationally than you ever did. digital products and information are a very large part of entrepreneurship at the moment. People are producing video games and all sorts of things like that, which it's not exactly like hewing coal and sending it to another country, which is a big, difficult, capital-intensive operation. It's not like that. You can send digital products, like, for example, if you produce a university course, then and you can get some of the top presenters throughout the world, and you get them to do lectures and presentations and tutoring, and you can send that around the planet instantaneously. Yes, so entrepreneurship now is very much more international than it used to be, and you're getting new companies starting up with interesting entrepreneurial ideas that then grow to be large companies because they've got the whole world as a market rather than just their little village or their little town or their little part of the country.
A quick note. Did you know that we provide supplemental materials for each podcast? Listening to and understanding the key takeaways from our expert guests helps you think better about building a more beautiful business. Taking direct action and implementing these strategies is when the real work begins. Take a concrete, immediate step to implementing a better business model today by downloading the show notes and business tool we've created for this episode. Visit Mises.org/E4Bpod. That's MISES.org/E4BPOD and click on today's episode. Now, back to our interview.
And then you say that entrepreneurship has social benefits. Society is better when it's more entrepreneurial. And we can segue into the social role of profit, which you also talk about, but it's maybe not broadly recognized and not broadly enough that society benefits from the action of its entrepreneurs. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes, well, as I say, I mean, entrepreneurial products change people's lives. I mean, look at things like Amazon, for example, that in particular during the COVID pandemic, you're able to buy stuff without leaving your house. And certainly in the UK, and I suspect in many other people, much commerce has gone online. It's gone digital because people realize, this is a fantastic service that you get online. You order some goods, and they can be with you the next day. And you get very much more choice. So everything is to gain. You can see the competition out there. You can see the reviews that people have made of these products. You have a huge choice that you wouldn't get in an ordinary bricks and mortar shop, and you can get them the next day, or even sometimes the same day. And that's why we go to entrepreneurs, because they give us an absolutely fabulous service, or the good ones do, right? Many, as I say, will fail, but the good ones do, and that contributes to our human welfare and happiness, obviously. It also makes us, I think, more efficient. So we don't have, in the case of Amazon, we don't have to spend time trudging around shops, which you could, I used to, looking for small products. I might spend days looking around different refrigerators, for example, or whatever I wanted to buy, or even weeks looking at them. Whereas now I can see them all online. And it's not just a technology thing that this technology is now available. It's that somebody has worked out how to apply it in a way which is user-friendly and which will actually do the business. So entrepreneurs, contribute to our progress by constantly improving things. And you can't rest on your laurels, because somebody else will come along and they will improve it for you if you don't do it. So there's this constant competitive pressure to improve your offering. And also, of course, I think there's another moral issue here, which is that there are environmental benefits of using resources most efficiently. And that's one of the things that entrepreneurs do. The whole idea is to get the greatest value from the least input. That's what business is all about. That's profit and loss for you. And entrepreneurs are seeking that difference between the value that they generate and the cost, not just in financial terms, but in terms of the resources that are used. So, can you produce a product without using so much wood, or without using so much land, or without so much pollution? If you can do that, then people will beat it past your door.
Yeah. It seems absurd on the face of it that society would accuse entrepreneurs of destroying their own resources or harming their own environment. It's just not logical. It doesn't make sense if you understand what entrepreneurship is, I think.
Well, I think that, yes, people do see business as, if you like, extractive. That they say, well, you're using all these resources. And it's easy to see the resources, right? You can see the land that is used. You can see the trees that are cut down. You can see all of the minerals that are mined, and the mess that's produced from mining minerals. Those are all very obvious things. But in terms of what value is created, as I say, billions of people around the planet have inventions in their pocket which change their lives. Now, you can't even see that. Never mind measure it. It's just out there in the ether. It's so diffuse that you can't concentrate your mind on it. You can see the dirty mine, or the dirty logging operation, or whatever it is. You can't see the benefit which is in people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's a good Austrian point, that you can't measure these things, but you know it's there, and you know that it is absolutely fantastic. It's just unbelievable, the way that we have changed the planet and improved the lives of billions of people around the globe in just really the last 25 years, since international trade started to open up.
Yeah, the seen and the unseen, but the unseen is the unthought about. That's
the trouble. Yes,
that's the issue. Yeah. So you do spend a little time in the book, Eamonn, talking about fuzzy thinking. One of the issues with understanding entrepreneurship is we are a bit fuzzy thinking about it. And you say it's not small business, it's not starting your own business, it's not a mindset, it's not an individual characteristic. So tell us about the fuzzy thinking and what problems arise from that.
yes. I mean, a lot of people think that a small business is what entrepreneurship means. That a local corner store, that's entrepreneurial. That's those people who are running it are entrepreneurs. That's not actually true. The Entrepreneurship is something different from that, and it doesn't necessarily depend on size. I mean, large companies can be quite entrepreneurial sometimes. They've got the resources to put into it, and they've got the brain power. They can be quite entrepreneurial, but we think of entrepreneurs as mostly sort of lone wolves and so on, and therefore there's this tendency to think that, well, if a business is small, that's entrepreneurship. And how do we measure entrepreneurship? Well, we look at the number of small businesses and we add them up, and then that tells you how entrepreneurial a country is. Well, actually, some of the countries that have the largest number of small businesses are not very entrepreneurial at all. Partly because they don't have things like property rights, which allow businesses to grow, and so businesses stay small, because if they grew large, the police would probably come around and say, "Well, you don't have all the licenses you should have. You'd better give us, $1,000." That's what happens, and therefore you can't measure entrepreneurship by the number of small firms in a country. A local hamburger shop is not entrepreneurial, but Ray Kroc brought entrepreneurialism into McDonald's by working out how to produce hamburgers better, quicker, more reliably. It's hard to describe this entrepreneurial element is, so it's very hard to measure. and self-employment, small businesses might be high, but that doesn't make a country entrepreneurial. You need to look at the progress that is made in supplying products. How many new products are coming through? Are those new products actually surviving and improving people's lives, or are they just fads and they fade away? All of these things. Are people building on existing inventions and innovations? So all of these things are part of entrepreneurship. I think it's actually extremely difficult to define it, and that's why I think probably the economics textbooks have so much difficulty with it, and why politicians undervalue it.
We try to explore in the direction of entrepreneurship as a process, not a linear process, not deterministic, as you say, it can fail, but there's aspiration and intent at the beginning. There's the identification of a problem to solve. That's often the words that are used. There's the assembly of resources. There's taking those resources to market, finding out what the feedback is, refining and improving. You can identify it as a process. Do you think that's a good way to think?
Yes, it is a process. It's rather like scientific method, really. You make progress in the sciences by applying a certain method. You come up with theories, and you have a look, and you see whether the world does actually behave in the way that your theory would predict that it does. And if that's the case, then that's fine. You build on that. If it's not the case, then you go back to the drawing board and you have to come up with another explanation as to how the world works. And I think that entrepreneurship is a bit like that. As you say, it's evolutionary. It's entrepreneurs trying to work out how things work and what the best way forward would be. And I think entrepreneurship is as important for economic welfare as the scientific method is to our physical welfare. They're not dissimilar. Try new things, see what works, do more of what works and less of what doesn't work. Um, Edison, the great inventor, tried 10,000 different light bulb filaments. Used cat hair and goodness knows what else. And the Wright brothers tried out 5,000 different wing profiles before they got one they were satisfied with. So it's not that those are failures. What happens at the end of that process is that you come up with something that does actually work, and that progress benefits the entire world, changing people's lives for the better. And that's why, in the case of Edison, for example, light now costs a tiny, tiny fraction of what candles cost when Adam Smith was writing The Wealth of Nations. There's a phrase, not worth the candle. Well, the original is the game's not worth the candle. You're playing a game and you look and you say, well, it's not a very interesting game. The candle is more valuable. Candles were incredibly valuable. We take them for granted today, but they used to be very expensive. And they didn't give you much light. So that today you can have LEDs around your home, all the rest of it, and it costs almost nothing. So this is huge progress, and it's because of that method. It's because of that process that people go through of trial and error and coming up with goods and services which people actually want and which improve their lives and which they buy.
Dr. Sarah Sarathbasi, if I can pronounce her name rather badly over here, she writes about the entrepreneurial method, and she contrasts it specifically with the scientific method. So the scientific method is wonderful. It got us where we are today. But the entrepreneurial method is different. It should have the same kind of status, but it's not linear. It's not determined by laws. It's not predictive. It's somewhat messy. And as you say, it's exploratory, and it may or may not arrive at a success. And Alicia Herrero, another name I have trouble pronouncing, she calls that science 2.0, that the idea of emergence is in contrast to the scientific method. So what do you think of all that, the entrepreneurial method as a different approach to the scientific method?
Well, I'm willing to accept that up to a point. I think that they have something in common, which is trial and error, or I should say trial and success, probably. That they both involve people coming up with ideas and testing them against reality. In the scientist's case, the reality of the physical world. In the entrepreneur's case, the reality of the demand of markets and human beings. And if they find things that work, then they build on that and do more. And both do that. Scientists do that, and entrepreneurs do that. If you've got a great product, then improve it even further and make it even greater. If you've got a great physical theory, work on that and apply it to more things. So I think they're actually very similar in both in certain ways. Yes, you're right. I mean, obviously the entrepreneur isn't, if you like, entrepreneurship isn't a predictive science. That is true. It's not, you're not making claims about how the future will work because you don't know, because human beings are very fickle sorts of creatures. And tomorrow they may be demanding entirely different products than they're demanding at the moment. Circumstances change, whereas in the physical world, circumstances don't change that much. So they're different in that way, in that they are dealing with a different environment, physical as opposed to economic, but I think they're still pretty much the same sort of approach. With the added dimension, of course, is that entrepreneurs have to be managers. They actually have to create this reality. They're not just theorizing about it. They have to manage resources, focus, land, labor, capital, networks, and all sorts of other capital, and focus that on producing their product and getting it to customers, explaining to customers how it will improve their lives, and getting them to buy it. So that's a different process, which scientists don't get into. I think the closest would be to say engineers kind of do that in the physical world. That they take the science and then they build bridges out of it, and sometimes the bridges succeed and sometimes they don't, of course. But an entrepreneur, I think, does all of those things. It does the scientific bit and the engineering bit.
Yeah. So governments want to get involved, Eamonn. They say, hey, you're right, this entrepreneurship is wonderful. We should have more of it. So let us dive in and encourage it. I talked to Professor Sam Mortinu recently, and he had studied public venture capital funds, which apparently they have in Europe. I don't know whether they have them in the UK. And proved fairly definitively with lots of data to support them that they fail where private venture capital funds succeed. And obviously, he had the insight to explain that. But tell us what you think about government intervention and encouragement of entrepreneurship.
Well, it is, as one economist called it, the boulevard of broken dreams, that governments think that they can help promote entrepreneurship, and that they can promote innovation and invest in research and do all of that kind of stuff. And most of these things are actually complete failures. And governments use grants and subsidies and tax breaks to try to get more innovation and more research and all the rest of it. Entrepreneurship isn't just wholly about innovation. It isn't just wholly about research. It's actually much wider than that. And if you haven't got the conditions right, then it won't work. And so there's been all sorts of strategies to try to boost innovation, and that's, we're told, going to make us all more entrepreneurial, and they never actually work. Too often, they become very bureaucratic schemes. I think entrepreneurs are probably very wise not to take public money for things like research and so on, because it just ties you into the bureaucrat's way of doing things, and you end up under a snowstorm of paperwork. and having to do things their way when you really ought to be doing it your way and striking out on your own and trying something new, trying something maybe that's risky, which of course government officials just hate. They're greatly risk averse, and so these things generally don't work. I mean, governments like to get involved because they like to think that they're stimulating things, and that they also think it's a national prestige at stake if we've got the best, I don't know, high-speed rail or whatever it happens to be, and they think that's entrepreneurship, and governments can be entrepreneurial. Governments can't be entrepreneurial. It's a completely different process. That officials are guardians of public money. They get punished if they waste money. Well, they don't get punished; they get moved sideways if they waste money. They don't get any kudos at all if they take a risk and do something, which pays off dramatically. If they take a risk and it fails, right, then they get moved sideways. So it's a completely different mindset. The entrepreneur has to take a risk and bear the consequences. Might be right, might be wrong, but that's the risk you have to take. And most entrepreneurs I know relish in taking those risks, and
Right.
they're very, very shrewd and quick at getting out of things if it's clear that the risk hasn't paid off. And governments, on the contrary, are exceedingly slow at doing that sort of thing, and keep on pouring money. Even when circumstances have changed, they keep on pouring money into public so-called investments. So no, I think there's a story about Diogenes, who was a Greek cynic philosopher, and he rejected the ways of the world, and he lived in a barrel. And he was once visited by Alexander the Great. And Alexander came up to him, this great man, and in his barrel, and said, "Great Diogenes, how can I, Alexander, with all my wealth and armies, how can I help you?" And Diogenes said, "Stand out of the sunlight." And it is, I think, like that, that if government stands out of the sunlight, then lots of entrepreneurial firms will spring up and grow like grass, growing through a concrete concrete path. It's just natural.
Is there any way we can encourage a culture of entrepreneurship in schools or education or at the community level? Forget the government for a second, but I mean, your books perhaps are trying to do that. We have a series over here called the Tuttle Twins, which is aimed at
Yes, I know.
kids 7 to 12 or 13, and it tries to introduce them to ideas like entrepreneurship. Are there ways to encourage a culture at a young age of entrepreneurship?
Well, up to a point. I mean, I don't think that you can mandate entrepreneurship. You can't necessarily create entrepreneurship. I think the conditions are right for it to emerge, or they're not. You need the right environment. Now, literacy and school education are actually some of the most important factors in promoting entrepreneurship, because education gives people ideas, and young people get ideas, and it also provides them with the basic skills they need to put those ideas into practice. Managing money, for example, running a business. I think our education system should focus very much more on businesses and how they're run. I mean, my parents ran a small gas station and repair shop, and I understand in my guts about how small businesses operate and the
Mhm.
problems that you have with customers and all the rest of it. You don't get any of that in the economics textbooks. You don't get any of that in school. And I think that partly because teachers themselves are part of the public sector machine. They're not part of an entrepreneurial culture. So they don't understand entrepreneurship. They don't understand small business. They don't understand business growth. And I think if we could do something on those lines, I think it would certainly yield benefits. But what you've got to do is to get the institutions right to allow entrepreneurship to come through. You've got to have things like flexible labor markets so that people can try things, hire staff to make a product, and if it doesn't work, well, get rid of them and start again. Whereas in many Western countries, there is such job protection that you can't really do that. So that hugely increases the risk when you start a new enterprise. That when you take people on, if you can't make them redundant because the business just isn't working, well, what do? You're stuck, and you ratchet up huge debts. So a flexible labor market, that kind of thing, rule of law, so that the protection of property, so that when people do come up with ideas and products, those ideas and products are protected. They can't just be stolen by other people. I think you need a culture in which it's okay to fail. America's very good at this. I'm not sure we are, but America's very good at this. People can make a mistake, pick themselves up, and have another go. And most entrepreneurs have had at least one failure. Many have had 3 or 4. I mean, even I was talking about Amazon. Jeff Bezos, went into financial services and all sorts of things that just didn't work. And he learned from that, and then refine the things that did work. So all successful entrepreneurs have had their failures. We have to realize that it's okay to fail. And I think you also need a culture in which anyone can make the best of their talents and ideas, where young people or women or particular castes or classes or races aren't shunned, but are welcomed when they come forward with new ideas and products and processes that can transform people's lives, and they're not suppressed or resented just because of who they are. And you need institutions which are open. You need just institutions of justice and ideas of honesty. These sorts of things are important to allow businesses in general to flourish. And once that happens, then you can start having entrepreneurialism flourishing.
I heard you tell an interviewer, Eamonn, that you are optimistic on that front for the future, optimistic for the future of entrepreneurship. I'm not sure whether you were talking about the UK specifically or the Western world or the world as a whole, but let's wrap up there with your optimism for the future.
Oh yes, I think I'm hugely optimistic for the world. I mean, despite everything that's going on, I think the direction of human travel has been entirely positive. Things are getting better and better. Things are getting cheaper and cheaper, and we owe that to entrepreneurship. And as you look around the planet, there are so many. I go to many countries, including poor countries, and you went sort of 30 years ago, and things were really difficult, and there weren't many opportunities, and people's horizons were low. Now I think, and it's partly because of entrepreneurship, and it's because of the international trade and markets, and it's because of the things like people have got iPhones in their pockets. They can set their sights very much higher, and education is better, and we're getting even in places like Afghanistan much more female education, which is absolutely crucial to this. And people have got a much better base now on which to not only just come up with ideas, but to put those ideas into practice. And that's not true just here in the UK or in America. It's true all over the world. And as I go around the world these days, I see people, jabbering into their mobile phones, and I think, how can government control this lot? I think they are coming up with ideas. They're discussing ideas with their friends and colleagues, and I think we're just going to see much more entrepreneurship, much more trade, much more economic growth. It's going to be fantastic. I wish I could live long enough to see the end of it.
Well, Eamonn, thank you for your optimism, your lucidity, your explanation of entrepreneurship, and everything you do for that positive development of free markets going into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind words. Thank you.
Economics for Business is a production of the Mises Institute. To explore more content like this, visit Mises.org. And for more from Hunter Hastings, visit hunterhastings.com.